Hello, guys, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Film Angle. My name is Kris,
And I'm Alex.
and we're really excited to kind of kick off. This is our first kind of recorded episode of the new year. We recorded, well, we did anticipation. We knew we were gonna be kind of burned out coming back to work straight after Christmas, so we kind of recorded a couple episodes before, just getting ahead of ourselves, making sure that there was enough content out there. We were talking about our best movies of 2022, but
And
it's a
that
new
was
year.
always going to be a big one. You know,
Yeah,
we knew we ended up chatting for a couple of hours. On our top 10. We weren't sure if it was going to be one episode or two.
yeah.
Two made more sense, and even just to help us out a bit as well.
So yeah, 2023. We've kind of set ourselves a really, really big goal, as we alluded to on a previous episode, where we were going to attack BFI's Sight and Sound top 100 movies of all time list. Um, Ashamedly, I've only seen about a third of this list before going into it, so this is going to be a bit of an undertaking. I don't know. Were you sort of similar, Alex? Were we kind of at the similar sort of like amount of movies that we ticked off this list?
Yeah, I think I was on. I think I'd seen 32 of them when the list first came out. Yeah, it's quite an interesting challenge to take on because it's not your standard 100 greatest films of all time, and even for Sight and Sound, I think it's been quite a wild year. So this is a list they do every 10 years, I believe.
Yeah,
Where they bring in a bunch of critics and filmmakers and just ask them to submit their top 10 films of all time. So, like, literally, their 10 the 10 films they think are the greatest of all time. They widened that search a little bit in 2022 to incorporate even more people,
yeah,
a lot more diversity, and that's kind of reflected in the list. Where we have, I mean, it was always big for international cinema, but even more so now, and a lot more kind of female directors popping up as well, which is always great to see. Including the number one film, which I'm not going to lie, Chris, I'd never heard of until it topped the greatest films of all
Well,
time list.
obviously the BFI list is it's such a big, mammoth milestone when it comes out every 10 years. Because before even I had seen the list being published, um, the film you're alluding to, Jean Dielman, was the number one like most reviewed thing on Letterboxd for about a week. And I was like, what this is like a 1970s French film that I've never heard of, and everybody's talking about it. What's the relevance? And that's why. Yeah, an interesting movie. I'm looking forward to getting around to, just to see what the fuss is all about. But yeah, the premise is something a bit to do with a woman kind of interacting with her daily chores, and something interesting happens. But it's like a 3+ hour movie,
Hmm.
so are a lot of epic international films that are on this list. So it's going to
It's
be,
interesting, is it? Because I feel like this list itself is full of either like 3 hour films or 90 minutes, nice and short.
yes, yeah,
Doesn't seem to be a lot of in between, as I've kind of had a look. But yeah, I mean, I must say, out of all the films, the number one film is the one I'm kind of dreading when we get to it, probably by the end of the year. Um, like
oh no.
it doesn't well, it does interest me, but that sounds like a long film, and I think the
Yeah,
mundanity of the topic is a massive theme within the film. However, it must be said, one of the reasons I'm really enjoying getting into this list with you, Chris, is because it's number one, forcing us to watch films we might not have seen and tick off those blind spots that we probably should have seen. But the likelihood of us enjoying the films is quite high, I would say, because they have been curated by critics and filmmakers as the top 100 films of all time. So there's love for these films,
yeah.
um, and the potential of us loving them is high. And I think um, when we get to the first two films that we ticked off the list, because we're going from top to bottom, so
We're going from 100 to 1. Yeah.
we're going from 100 to 1. Only the blind spots. Um,
Yes, any movies we'd seen previously, we're just going to skip over those. Obviously, that's going to be different. There'll be one or two different movies that you've seen that I haven't seen, vice versa. But yeah, we're just gonna make sure that we've seen every movie on this list at least once is kind of our goal.
Yes. So even though there might be the odd film that you've seen, Chris, that I haven't, obviously you can still chat about that when I come to it. If there's a conversation worth having, but I think there will be. These films are gonna create a lot of conversation, I think. So yeah, no, I'm really excited to get going, and yeah.
I always see like the new year whenever I start January. I'm like, right, I'm gonna watch as many movies as I possibly can, and it usually starts off really, really well. January and February, I get through like 50 titles, and then it gets slower. Life gets in the way, but yeah, I really want to cover as much base this year as possible. And in the new year, I don't know what your watching habits were like, Alex. I managed to not only start addressing this list that we're going to talk about today, but got around some really big mainstream movies from last year too that didn't have the chance to see. Marcel, The Shell with Shoes On. That was my New Year's Day, my first movie of 2023. Have you had a chance to catch up with this movie yet?
No, I haven't. I haven't. It's I think it's just one of those films that's kind of I think it's probably just dropped on UK rentals and just obviously had a bigger US release. So yeah, one of those films I really do need to catch up with. Like you, I have been catching up with a lot of things over the new year, but
Mm.
yeah, Marcel with the Shoes On was not one of them. However, very beloved, I believe, from what I hear from reviewers in the States.
Yeah, and I do feel like that is deserved. I don't know if it's like top 10 category because a lot of people have been putting it in their top 10s and even maybe like their number one movie of last year. It's really sweet. It's really downplayed, and the voice acting is just on par. I mean, you even got Isabella Rossellini in here playing a grandmother Shell in the most sympathetic and like she's like the ultimate grandmother in this, and it's so sweet, tugs at your heartstrings, and it's just really, really funny. Yeah, I dug this character. I didn't even realize I never really watched the YouTube shorts that it was based on. It's been like Marcel's been a character. He's existed on the internet for since like 2010. He's been around for quite a while, and this is just his really first big outing.
Yeah, it was like a YouTube thing, right? It was like a
Yeah,
series of short clips and films on YouTube, right?
which I admit I hadn't seen before.
No, no, neither have I.
But yeah, definitely worth catching up on. I also think Strange World. I caught up with that on Disney Plus, a movie that like super failed last year. I think it's probably one of not just Disney's biggest box office flop, but I mean it's of the last year. It's probably one of the biggest disappointments in terms of how much budget it cost and what it made. It was kind of dropped in cinemas last year, but like no fanfare or no marketing whatsoever. I think I went to the cinema one day and there's just a giant poster for this movie, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know this was out yet, and I think that kind of reflects in the ticket sales. A lot of people kind of been dumping on it and not being
Yeah.
the biggest fans. I think it's really because it struggles to really fit into the square peg of what usually defines like a Disney audience. It appeals to a very specific audience. It kind of is reminiscent of those Journey to the Center of the World sort of type of movies, mixed with a little bit of Indiana Jones and but sci-fi in there too. But I don't see what everybody was fussing about it. I thought it was a really, really good movie. Perfect for a Friday night when you just want to chill. Follows the Disney formula, like they all do, but I thought it was really attention grabbing. The visuals are some of the most beautiful I have seen from Disney animation. He obviously year to year are just improving on themselves more and more. Um, yeah, I dug it. I thought the voice acting was great. Dennis Quaid plays the grandfather in it, and you wouldn't recognize it was Dennis Quaid. He sounds so cool. Um, yeah, it was just a really good family dynamic movie and kind of speaks to our time too. It has really good has a really good modern reflection of what the normal nuclear family in America looks like now.
Well, that's probably why it, it didn't get
And
so.
that's probably why people hate it.
I mean,
But-
it is a curious one because obviously Disney Animation have done so many good things. Now, I haven't seen the film, but obviously I just saw the bunch of crap that comes along with any kind of film where somebody's gay, which I assume someone's gay in the film, right, Chris?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that's it. As soon as that happens, you get all the bloody crazy people calling
And
it
that's what's so
woke.
interesting about the movie. The movie is about fathers, and it's about a grandfather, his son, and then his son. And it's kind of the differences between those generations and how they learn to sort of work with and accept each other through that. And, kind of comes from a place of negativity at the beginning, and that adapts as the movie goes along. And that's something that's new, but it was really entertaining and it really worked, and I didn't feel shoehorned in. Yeah, I think people just like to jump on these things really quickly and are really against the wokeness that they proclaim Disney is after. Yeah, I thought a lot of it was had a lot of genuine heart in it, and I really fell for the movie. So I think people should just give it a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think a movie's too woke, then just stop listening to the podcast because I'm bloody sick of these, bloody sick of woke being thrown around so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. What about yourself, though, Alex? Did you catch up in many big movies from last year? I mean,
Yeah, I did actually. I'm the same as you. I like to really get in at the start of the year. Usually have a few days off with New Year and stuff. So I really like
mhm.
to kind of throw myself into as many films as I can.
Plus the nights
Um,
are dark and rainy and horrible. There's nothing
Exactly,
better to do.
exactly. There's not much to do out there, really, is there? So yeah, I caught up with Bodies, 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 which is a film I really wanted to see throughout the year, but just
Mm,
timings and all that kind of stuff stopped me from doing so. I absolutely adored it. I thought it was a
it's good, right?
brilliant film. Maybe adoration's the wrong term for a film that's kind of this satirical horror film, but yeah, almost by the end a comedy of errors in a way.
Yeah.
Kind of perfectly sums up the kind of current I wouldn't say like generation, but like the current culture that surrounds kind of the Gen Z
Oh yeah, it
and
captures
maybe
that brilliantly.
some of those late millennial kind of cultures. It's going to age very fast, but
True.
it's kind of it'll become like a historical horror film, I think, at some point. And
Absolutely.
I thought it was absolutely brilliant, and really well cast, and
Oh, really, really well cast. Yeah.
really interesting there. So I definitely recommend people go check that one out. On other horror thriller films, The Menu, which is on Disney Plus at the moment. Again, I
Mhm.
know you got to see that late last year with Anya Taylor Joy and Nicholas Hoult and Rafe Fiennes
Mhm.
playing a kind of famous chef whose menu is very surprising on this private island. Goes to some weird places. Actually, at the time of recording right now, I told my parents to go watch it and just said it was a little drama about a snobby chef, in the hopes that those kind of surprises that come in midway really do shock. I might get a phone call later being like, "What the hell?"
No, I think this movie's great. You know what? I think it's very comparable. It came out sort of just before Glass Onion, so a lot of people are like, "Hey, this hasn't got enough as much going on as Glass Onion did, and ultimately that's a better movie." I would actually argue the other way. I think I enjoyed The Menu more simply because it goes for simplicity. It's not too tongue tied and trying to come up with a really, really clever satire. It's just a really good, fun time that has a simple message, and it's really rewatchable. And it throws some surprises in there, but the movie just moves. And Anya Taylor Joy leads it really, really well. Rafe Fiennes, even though doing a questionable American accent, he's still, it's Rafe Fiennes, and he knocks out a brilliant performance. And yeah, it was a really interestingly structured movie. I think it's accessible for everybody. I think your parents are going to come out really enjoying it because I think anybody could get a kick out of this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I just really wanted those twists to shock them. Uh, yeah, I got into food a lot during the pandemic. for better or worse. And kind of saw a little bit of myself in Nicholas Hoult, not too much, but a little bit where I was like a little bit
Oh
uncomfortable.
yeah.
But yeah, no, really, really interesting, and kind of um, interesting relationship with food as well, and that kind of snobbery world. Love it or
Well, it's
hate it.
interesting. You don't even have to be really into food to understand to relate, unfortunately, to that
No, no,
character,
definitely
because
not.
it's sort of like fanboy culture, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
like even the way we talk about movies sometimes. Where if I think about my teenage self or anything talking about movies, I see a lot of myself in that character, and whenever that like the artistry, we can sit here, we can critique and talk about what doesn't work in a movie, but as soon as that artist gives us the pen and the brushes to do it ourselves, we'll be just like that character and fumble and not be able to replicate it. So there is a self-awareness going on there and a little bit of a jab that cinema's supposed to provoke, and I think that was the strongest part of that movie, actually.
absolutely, absolutely. And then I guess other highlights. I don't want to talk too much about Nanny because surprisingly, it's an Amazon Prime film. Really good, but surprisingly pairs really well with a film that we're going to talk about for our Sight and Sound um, top 100. So
Mm.
yeah, which is interesting because I saw it like a couple of days before I saw. Can I say? Can I say I can say what we're watching, what we've watched, or not yet?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
So Black Girl, the 1966 film by Usman Semben. Um, Basically, Nanny, which is the new 2022 film, follows a Senegalese woman who's come to New York to and becomes a maid. Or no, she becomes a nanny. Sorry,
mhm.
for an American family there, and weird stuff goes on. Um, it's not completely the same, but it is funny that Black Girl, which we'll talk about later, is about a Senegalese woman who goes over to be a nanny for a French household. And
Yeah,
I could just feel like potentially
it was
there's
inspired by it.
a lot of inspiration going on there.
Mm.
Maybe not. Maybe I've read into that too much, but basic plot something there at least. So yeah, Nanny's really good. Definitely worth checking out if you've got the Prime subscription. And Fire of Love on Disney Plus, documentary about two volcanologists and their
Yes, I
kind
meant
of
to catch up on that.
relationship. Surprisingly, and I guess they've got a filmmaker element to them as well because they document all their kind of scientific findings in a way that looks like a Wes Anderson film. It's
Right.
but
So
also
it's not
very
like Talking Heads.
no, the narration is the one thing so it's a narrated piece, and the
Mm.
narration is maybe the one thing that I kind of didn't agree with so much. Now, obviously, the volcanologists are French, and the way they filmed it, I say Wes Anderson, but really, there's a lot more kind of French New Wave vibes
Okay.
going on from that era. And I think the narration is kind of a very kind of kind of takes from that era as well, where it's a very kind of I'm just talking like this, and it's quite not slow, but kind of it feels
Right.
half-assed, and I don't think it is. But I didn't enjoy that
It's
aspect as much.
moody.
But the documentary is insane, and the visuals are incredible, and yeah, it'll make you tear up by the end. But yeah, the, the footage they have of volcanoes is
Oh, I've seen the trailer and it looked
insane,
impressive. Yeah, 100%.
insane.
I mean to catch up with that. That's on Disney Plus right now, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, very much worth checking that out. But those are my highlights of kind of a bunch of films I've been watching.
Should we go right into our sight and sound list that what we ticked off so far? We're really at the beginning phase of this. It's going to be an uphill battle. Not at all, actually, because I've been really enjoying this so far. I've already ticked off a few movies on this list, and
Yes.
I don't think there's one I've hated so far. I've and a few I've definitely loved. So this is going to be really fun to talk about.
Definitely, definitely. And it's worth saying as well, by doing this as well, it means we both have seen the films that we talk about. So that makes things a
A
lot more
conversation.
interesting, because there were definitely some episodes last year where you've seen a film, Chris, and I haven't, and I'm like, oh, great, that sounds good.
Yeah, it was much more of like a turn taking sort of exercise, which
Yeah,
want to fizzle out.
we want to
So
discuss films more.
exactly. And the first one, which was actually number 100,
There
so
you go.
that shows you how weak we are already. It started right from the beginning, and it was Tropical Malady.
Directed by a Pong. We are cool.
Thank you for getting in there, Alex, before me, so I didn't butcher the name.
I have been practicing. However, I still feel like I butchered his last name. However, and this might not be true because it's on Wikipedia, but apparently his friends call him Joe. Okay.
Okay, so it's Tropical Malady, guys, directed by Joe. That's how we're going to refer to this for us the podcast.
A Pong's quite easy to say, so we would
A
just call
beach
him a
bong, yeah,
Pong.
I can
A
do
Pong.
that. It's part two. That's a little bit hazy for me, but I will
Yeah,
try my
it's
best.
it's a 2004. How would you describe this film? Because obviously it's almost like a film of two halves.
Yeah, it's very allegorical, I would say.
Mm,
It's almost, see, I haven't seen many Thai films, but the ones I have seen, they seem to be very connected to the mythology of the land and their ancestry and stories that they tell, and their movies seem to be, even if they're tied into reality, like to be, there's a base of spirituality to how these movies operate. And the first half of this movie focuses on a relationship that develops between a soldier and a farm boy who, start to have feelings for each other, and we go on a journey. It's not really very plot driven. It's more just like a series of evenings or days or timelines where they kind of spend the day with each other, and the relationship materializes in front of you, and there's nothing really literal going on plot wise, or they're not really saying outwardly how they feel all the time. You're just really kind of watching a feeling being evoked between the two.
yeah,
There's a
it
space that exists.
it reminded me a lot, and it's not just because it's two men, but it reminded me a lot of Call Me by Your Name, in the way of we're kind of watching this thing develop, and you're not sure, is this going the way it's going? Yes, it is. And also, the other thing that's worth saying as well, that also kind of feels like Call Me by Your Name, nobody cares. And this is 2004. This is Thailand. I'm not sure
Mm,
what kind of LGBTQ plus culture is like in Thailand, but this film is very much not concerned about having any kind of antagonist to the fact that these two men have
yes.
fallen in love. It's very much a time is the element that is eventually going to end the relationship.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I can't really speak for when this movie was released in 2004, but kind of on the back of this movie, because I was interested in that, like the cultural sort of landscape of this movie. I kind of had a little look online to see, how Thailand's sort of landscape of treating its LGBTQ plus culture is like, and they seem to be one of the better countries in Asia in terms of dealing. They're seem to be quite accepting, and I think they're bringing in the same sex marriage law now. So there's momentum in that, and I think it's got a very big transgender community and everything. And that's kind of part of the Thai spirit, and it's part of their identity. So yeah, it was really nice and refreshing to watch a movie about a relationship like this, and it wasn't just dealt as the whole crux of the story wasn't because it was a taboo. It was just like it was more just watching the sensuality between a man and another man kind of develop, and I appreciated
Absolutely. It was my favorite half of the film.
that.
Um, the second half delves further into kind of mysticism and potential Thai mythology. I think this is potentially where the film kind of loses me a bit. It's not concerned with like a normal kind of narrative structure. It's just like you said, it's more just kind of footage of feeling, um and it might be too ingrained in Thai culture that I haven't got all the points that
Yeah,
I need to take away from this film. I might be wrong there, but I
especially with
found
part
myself
two.
kind of struggling with part two a little bit. It's a little
Mhm.
slower. There's a lot of
It,
jungle noises
it's
going
not a
on.
little it's not a little slower. It's a it does come down to a crawl the second half of the movie, and not all in a bad way, but it yeah, it does turn into an hour of a man kind of just working his way through foliage. um,
Yeah, so he's lost in the jungle, or no, he's not lost. He's trying to find a mystical tiger, right?
Well, the start of the movie, the first half, there is the movie opens with a group of farmers on a field, and they're discussing how their cattle keep getting murdered by this tiger, and then it's kind of and that's dropped for the rest of the movie, and you kind of forget about that plot. You think it's just a backdrop thing, and then that becomes the forefront of the second half of the movie. So I think that's the tiger that they're referring to.
Yeah, I could have done. Do you know, I could have watched a lot more of the first narrative had it been maybe expanded and maybe a little bit more going on. But yeah, it was fine. I didn't love
Yeah,
this film, but it was interesting. I wonder if I was swept up on the big screen watching this, if I had better knowledge of kind of Thailand and its culture, potentially this film would have hit better for me. Because obviously there's a reason it's on the top 100 films of all time.
of course,
But
yeah.
you know, if I was making a list of the top 100 films of all time, probably wouldn't be on there at this point.
Yeah, I think you really. It's one of those movies I felt like I had little to no knowledge about how this sort of the world that he is operating in this film really functions. I find that quite fun to kind of navigate, and I felt rewarded by the end of the movie. Spoiler alert! I felt at the end of the movie when he finally tracks down the tiger and confronts it that the tiger was almost a stand-in for Ton in the first half of the movie,
Mm,
um, almost like the shame that comes with the homosexual feelings as well as the anger and the lust mixed together. It was a, kind of an allegory for passion. I thought was quite interesting, but you're so right. I think it's so embedded in I think it requires some sort of foundation of knowledge of the spirituality of Thailand or the mythology to kind of really make you on board and not try to work your way through what it's trying to do. And I think that's what the movie is like as an experience altogether. You're trying to work out what it's all about. I think ultimately I liked it and it was a good experience. But yeah, probably not one of the most rewatchable movies on this list.
no, no. However, definitely made me want to kind of seek what the director's done since. And he did have a
Yeah,
film with Tilda Swinton that came out last year, I believe.
yeah, Memoria.
Uh, Memoria. I haven't seen it yet. I don't know if it had a UK release. It's probably just one of
No,
those kind of smaller film that's been dropped on streaming or rentals again. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I love Tilda Swinton, so I'm definitely intrigued in checking that one out.
100%, 100%. So the next one we caught up with was Black Girl, which you alluded to earlier on, which was a movie I very much got on board with.
Yes, I was a big fan of this film. The 1966 um, film directed by Usman Semben. Did you know, Chris, from my little bit of kind of research on the film,
Mm.
the French film, um, the French title, sorry, for the film is Le Noir de,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
it translates approximately to something like Black Girl of,
Okay.
which I think is quite interesting because obviously
That is
this is a
interesting.
film about um, identity.
Yeah. I mean, you're kind of finding a woman who doesn't really know where she belongs or tries to fit. The way she dresses in this movie, she obviously becomes a servant for a French family. Is it down in Nice when they're on holiday? She becomes a temporary nanny, but ends up just being forced to do the housework instead, which is very demeaning and an unadvertised role. And
Yeah,
yeah, I found it quite interesting. Was she is determined, even though her employer absolutely detests it, to wear high heels all the time, which I found was and dress properly. Dignity is the biggest thing. That's the
Yeah, I
biggest
think
message in the
she's
film.
got a finger on the pulse of kind of like Western or French fashion.
Mm,
She obviously is wants to go to France. She wants to enjoy the culture there, and she's been offered to go from the kind of French couple family who have employed her as a nanny in Senegal, which I believe was French occupied at the
mm,
time, and then obviously take her to Nice and don't really use her as a nanny and more as a maid, and kind of all the microaggressions that kind of follow on from that. Yeah, for 1966, you know, there's a lot of kind of racial bias involved here, a lot of kind of
mm.
racial undertones, and I mean that from it knows about them and it's playing on them. And it wants you to know that the kind of microaggressions that transgress throughout the course of the film are not on. Obviously, Ousmane Sembène is an African, a French African director, I believe.
Yes.
I believe that's how you would kind of say it. And this was kind of the first sub-Saharan film that kind of made it mainstream, I believe.
Yes. No, I think it's very like it's very specific and it captures a very specific time period. Like you mentioned, you're seeing like a snapshot in time that is very limited in terms of worldview. And you're right. You're because the country is kind of losing its identity. She kind of reverberates that where she's sort of in the middle too, where she doesn't really know where to side with her culture or really to move on and float towards Western culture. And that's kind of symbolized by the mask being on the wall. The kind of
Yes.
yeah, by at the start of the movie, she gives the family um, a mask as a gift, and they arguably either wear it proudly on the wall or use it as a hey as almost like a we went here and we got the T-shirt sort of thing. Their house is decorated with very minor African ornaments, although they don't really seem to recognize it. And it seems to be more just like a token of travel, of well traveledness, and a reason to boast off at parties. And it's only just staring her at the face in her face when she's having to force to cook and clean as a mockery device almost.
Yeah, it's and also it's kind of like a very simple metaphor for her own being in whatever setting she's in, but it's really strong as well.
Mm,
When they end up going to Nice and she's in this kind of strange world that isn't her home anymore. The mask is placed on a wall with nothing else on it. It's just a white wall. The mask is
yes.
surrounded by white. It's out of place almost, and
Mm.
kind of staring at her.
And
And
the
yeah,
whole apartment's like this. Like we rarely leave the apartment, and she's bird caged in here, and the whole and every wall in this building is white. And yeah, and exactly. I mean, even when she's forced to serve people at dinner parties, clean up, she stands out compared to everybody else, and people like to point that out.
yes,
And Diowana, is it?
yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah,
it's
she plays it with
was it?
such a grace and like such a patience as an actress. I don't know if she'd done a lot of work before, but it holds up so well today, so well. And the thing that really struck me about the movie, not just because of its themes, was how drop dead gorgeous it looked.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, yeah, I got to see it was on the BFI channel. I got to see it on a 4K scan, um, and it just looked absolutely stunning. You would think some of the shots, the close ups, you could jump right into the pores of these characters. It was made yesterday. It almost felt like a pastiche to a film of the 60s, as opposed to watching a movie from 1966. It was really really impressive.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. It was, yeah, it's quite a restoration as well. I looked at some clips on YouTube, and I think there was a video
Yeah, you
essay
showed me
which
some.
had been done probably maybe before the 4K restoration, or they hadn't taken clips from it, and the difference
Hmm.
was really, really striking. But yeah, I mean, absolutely gorgeous film. This was my first Usman Senben film,
Same.
and it made me want to search out more. And yeah, it's one of those films where I don't think I'd heard of this film before seeing it on the Sight and Sound list. So I'm really happy that it's kind of a kind of new discovery for myself. Yeah, really, really enjoyed it. and kind of its combination of two
Mm.
cultures, the French and Senegalese, and the kind of battle of identity within that. Yeah, I thought it was really, really well done, and nippy as well. A nippy 60 minutes.
Oh, I was about to say the best the best reason to watch this movie, guys. It's exactly 60 minutes. No, but it uses its time so well. You know, it doesn't. It's not like it gets in and gets out. It's 60 minutes. It's tight, but it feels like a longer movie in a good way. It feels like
Feels like
it
it's
gives
said a lot.
itself room to breathe, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
um, and really homes down the message even more as it goes along and develops characters on the way. And yeah, it has a very, I won't spoil it for anybody if you want to catch up with it, but it has a very strong, powerful ending that kind of comes out of nowhere. But feels kind of really well earned and very, very forward for the time. So yeah, I think this is a very, not just a good movie, but a significant piece of a piece of historical document that you should look back on. And kind of, it's interesting to reflect that people were having these thoughts and these feelings 60 years ago. Even we like to demonize people back then, so there were artists who were completely recognizing this at the time.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely.
So that kind of is where we're at the minute. So yeah, really, really enjoying it. We started off two movies that couldn't be really any more different from each other. And looking through the list, that trend seems to just keep carrying on. Alex, I know your next movie. I think I just jump ahead of you here because you've never had a chance to catch up with Sergio Leone's classic spaghetti western Once Upon a Time in the West, which teenage Chris, one of his favorite movies of
I
all time.
know that.
So this could be a really, really positive discussion next week, or it could be just me being flabbergasted for a good hour and you trying to recoup.
Yeah, it's the Western genre. You beat me at. I hold my hands up. It's not a genre that I've dipped my toes into a lot. It's just not something I really grew up with, and it's not something I've tried to rectify since. I don't know why. Maybe it just doesn't interest me as much. I am very excited to watch Once Upon a Time in the West, though. It's an excuse to finally sit down and watch the 3 hour
Mm.
Western epic, which is supposed to be a masterpiece. 3 hour Western usually would put me off. Maybe that's why I've never seen it. But I am excited to sit down and watch this one. So again, it's forcing me to watch these films. Not in a horrible way, just in a I have the excuse now to sit down and get it done for the podcast. Um, Following on
Yeah.
from Once Upon a Time in the West. Oh, and it's worth saying as well that in number 98 is Get Out, which we've both seen. So
Yes. Sorry, I
we
skimmed
don't
over
need to
that too.
discuss that.
Yeah.
And we kind of did discuss it a little bit
Talked
when
about
we
Nope.
reviewed Nope. Um, so yeah, Once Upon a Time in the West is my next blind spot, followed by a blind spot for both of us, which is Buster Keaton's The General.
Mm-hmm. Really excited about this. Um, Yeah, I have to confess, where maybe the Western genre has always been kind of a good thing for me to rest on, the silent film genre is something I feel absolutely ashamed for not kind of really spending a lot of time on. And I think a lot of cinephiles can kind of, kind of agree with that. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and I think it's really exciting now because we're getting a lot more, reissued, rescanned versions of these classic movies that are we're talking about The General. In 3 years' time, that movie is going to be 100 years old, and I find
Yep.
that just absolutely just fascinating in itself. Buster Keaton is somebody I actually am completely got a blind spot on. I've seen a few Chaplins, but I've heard Keaton. Some people even prefer him over Chaplin, or at least hold him in the same regard. And I know in The General, I've seen clips before from other films in the past that this guy is an absolute maniac and
Yeah,
will
I think
do
we've all
will
seen like the train stuff, right? There's a
yes,
lot of
yes,
jumping in front of trains and doing
real
stunts whilst trains
trains.
are going. So yeah, no, I'm excited to catch up with this one. I am also rubbish rubbish cinephile and have not seen a lot of silent cinema.
But this is why this is good, though, because, you know, I could look at film lists every day and, "Oh, I haven't seen that, I haven't seen that." There's so many different directions that you're pulled into, and doing something like this is a way to filter yourself, and you're going to get a flavor of everything, right?
Yeah,
And that only opens a more can of worms, and that's what it's like to love film. Really, it's a rabbit hole that you just never kind of fall down to the bottom of,
yeah.
um, which is good though. So there's always going to be something to watch, always something to live for, Alex.
Definitely, definitely. Now, very excited to carry on this list with you, Kris.
If you guys want to catch up or volunteer, you can kind of join in with us on the discussion online on Instagram. We're on there, the Film Angle, baby. You gotta join us. We need those followers, so we need to get those numbers up. We are also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you guys get your podcasts from.
Absolutely. Looking forward to having you along board with us.
And we're not just going to be talking about the Sight and Sound list. We're going to be talking about new places
Oh,
as
yeah.
well. So don't worry if it's not your thing. We're going to be talking about the normal stuff too.
And every now
So,
and then, we'll chuck in a films that streaming should have forgotten, and we'll watch something truly, truly awful as well.
oh my goodness, no, that like takes. I think every time you would do that, I think it takes a year off my life. So,
I've been kind.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. But provisionally, we'll put a few of those in there. We'll see how the year goes.
Nice, nice. Excellent.
But that's been the Film Angle for now, guys. Thank you very much. Bye.
See you next week.